Have you ever fantasized about something terrible happening in your life, something that would completely shake things up? Maybe if you've watched The Walking Dead or some disaster kind of movie, and you think, or Lost. I think I had this with Lost at some point, and think, geez, it'd be really interesting if that happened to me. There's a kind of something in you feels like a longing for something mad like that to happen to you. There's a wonderful word for this, and that's what we're going to be exploring in this episode of The Living Philosophy. It's called Lachesism. Lachesism, noun, the desire to be struck by disaster, to survive a plane crash, to lose everything in a fire, to plunge over a waterfall, which would put a kink in the smooth arc of your life and forge it into something hardened and flexible and sharp, not just a stiff and prefabricated beam that barely covers the gap between one end of your life and the other. Lachesism is a word that was only come up with in the last few years, but the name comes from this ancient Greek goddess called Lachesis, and she was one of the three Moiroi, one of the three fates, the people who the three daughters who decided the fate of everyone's life, and Lachesis decided the length of someone's life, their lot in life. So it's the what fate has in store for you, and that's what Lachesism is about. It's wanting fate to throw you something. If you're stuck in a rut, if you're feeling caged by a life that isn't grand enough, that isn't doing enough for you, then you can start to fantasize about disaster. And this ties in, I guess, with the idea of the destroyer archetype, and it's the manifestation of the destroyer archetype in your imagination. It's the desire for something to wreck your life because you feel that your character can be remade. And I guess it's like the phoenix, it's like the philosopher's stone. It has to be tempered. You got to be put through the crucible in order to become the best version of yourself. And so if we're not put through enough adversity, if we're not put through the right circumstances, then maybe we never get to be what we can be. And so I feel like the idea of Lachesism has become more common in the modern world because, we see how coddled our lives are, how comfortable, and also how much opportunity there is, but we feel we get trapped by the chains of comfort, and we maybe don't go after that. So it's the vision of wanting the fates to wreck our life, to throw a curveball and just mess things up entirely. And I guess that's the appeal of things like zombie movies or end of the world movies. It's the feeling of being called to the highest level of humanity, because the greatest potentials of humanity don't come about except under exceptional circumstances, which reveal both the worst and the most amazing aspects of human nature. And this goes back to Heraclitus' old saying that war is the father of all things, and makes me think of Viktor Frankl's book Man's Search for Meaning, about his time in a few different Nazi concentration camps back during World War II. And what you really see in that book is you see like angelic people, and you also see people go the expected path of, I can really relate to people like the capo, or the people who are just greedy for that bit of bread. And you see the divides in human nature, and it's really amazing to just witness that. And there are extremes that could not be seen except under extreme circumstances. And it's both the tragedy, because you see the worst parts of human nature, but it's the beauty of tragedy insofar as you see the greatest parts of human nature. You see the triumphant human spirit in the face of great adversity. So the capo are like the Jewish prisoners who, for a little bit of extra bread, are sort of guards. They're between the Nazi guards and the prisoners themselves. And Frankl talks about how in many cases the capo are actually worse to their fellow inmates than the guards are. And they don't escape that fate. They just put it off a little bit longer. They're not actually on the side of the establishment. They're just somewhere in between, and they just get this revelry in the cruelty. And it's heartbreaking to see that, but then you also see some amazing stories. There's one story that Viktor Frankl gives, and it's of this woman, and it's worth quoting in full because it's the moment from that book that has stuck with me the most. It's such a beautiful story. The story of the young woman whose death I witnessed in a concentration camp. It is a simple story. There is little to tell, and it may sound as if I had invented it, but to me it seems like a poem. This young woman knew that she would die in the next few days. But when I talked to her, she was cheerful, in spite of this knowledge. I'm grateful that fate has hit me so hard, she told me. In my former life I was spoiled and did not take spiritual accomplishments seriously. Pointing through the window of the hut, she said, "This tree here is the only friend I have in my loneliness." Through that window she could see just one branch of a chestnut tree, and on the branch were 2 blossoms. "I often talk to this tree," she said to me. I was startled and didn't quite know how to take her words. Was she delirious? Did she have occasional hallucinations? Anxiously, I asked her if the tree replied. "Yes." What did it say to her? She answered, "It said to me, I am here, I am here, I am life, eternal life." That story always makes me emotional. It's just, there's something in there that it could take a whole lifetime to digest, but it's that idea, something that she says there of, I was spoiled in my previous life and there was no emphasis on spiritual accomplishments. And I think that's something we can all relate to, is we haven't been put to the test. We haven't been put into the situation that Job was put in the book of Job, or this woman in a concentration camp. And it's heartbreaking, but it's one of the most beautiful things you will ever see. And I guess that's the thing with Lachesism is we want to know the measure of ourselves, and this life of comfort and ease. Even with that, we are not happy. Even with that, we can be miserable. But it's that we know there's a greater potential within us. We know there's a greater potential for a greater connection to something. And imagine knowing that you're going to die in a couple of days, having lived many weeks, months, years in concentration camps, and to know your death is imminent, but to be cheerful in spite of it, and not to regret your past life, but to feel, yes, there's something calling to me, nature. I'm connected to something greater that says, I am here, I am life, eternal life. I mean, it's pure poetry to me, and that's something that's stuck with me through a lot of hard times, a lot of down moments where you think, this is, what am I worrying about, and yeah, so it's that idea of Lachesism, because I relate to that idea of Lachesism. I think why that word has become kind of popular in a certain sub-pocket of the internet is that it speaks to something universal that we maybe didn't need a word for that before, but we certainly need a word for it now. It's something at the core of us all. So that's just what I wanted to share on today's episode of The Living Philosophy. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. And otherwise, I shall see you next time. Thank you for watching.